really in a holding pattern. We're waiting and seeing and getting more direction in terms of what that means for San Juan Unified. So at this time, it's a real wait and see situation. On another front, our schools have been busy providing, particularly elementary K-8, they've been providing parent-teacher conferences this week. It's been a great opportunity to connect with parents and guardians around the progress for students. And so we always look forward to this time of year where we're able to discuss student progress and really make those personal connections. So those are happening right now too. And so with that, that's going to conclude my update. Thank you.
We have one question. I don't want to take over facilitating the meeting, so I'll let someone else call on raised hands.
Okay. Is it it's okay to go ahead and ask a question now?
Yeah, go ahead, Tom. And Kim, if you want to call on folks during this time, that's fine as well. But Tom, go ahead.
Okay, yeah,
Sure.
I had a question. I believe that there is one opening on our LCAP committee. And I was wondering when the board might be making another appointment to fill out the committee to its full membership.
Do you want me to take that, Paula?
Yeah, that'd be great. I was going to ask John or Laura to take that. Thank you.
Yeah, the board actually made a recommendation. We reached out to the person they recommended, and unfortunately the person had prior commitments. She's very, very interested for next year. So we still have the one opening. So we will have our board liaisons look at the remaining applications on file.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question as well. I want to know, so we already have applications on file. Can new applications be submitted?
Yes, new applications can be submitted. So we will work with Board President Villescaz, and then what we'll do is end up posting online the application process again.
Okay, thanks. Are there any other questions?
Well, I guess since you're accepting new applications, is there a deadline for those new applications to be considered by the board liaisons for appointment?
Again, that's a conversation that we'll have to have with our board president, and then we'll get back to the folks with the exact process of how that will take place.
Okay, all right. But if people do apply now, they would be possible considerations for the currently open position?
Again, Tom, we'll get back with details, but the intention is to follow the bylaws, which, I'm going to summarize here, which states that if an opening does occur, then our intention is to fill that position.
Okay, all right.
Then the person will serve out the remainder of the term, if that was the case.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, any more questions? Okay.
All right, so with that, we'll just thank you, President Villescaz and Deputy Superintendent Bassanelli. And so now we will move over to our staff report this evening. And so for our staff report this evening, we have Dominic Cavello, Director of Student Support Services, who's going to share some information about chronic absenteeism, as well as the programs and services that we have in place to support our students' attendance. So Dominic, we'll turn it over to you. And again, just thank you so much for joining us this evening. And so welcome.
Yeah, good evening. Thanks, John. And thank you all for inviting us. I am joined tonight by a couple of members of our attendance improvement program team. Once again, I'm Dominic Cavello, Director of Student Support Services, and I'm going to ask Victoria and Melissa to introduce themselves.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Victoria Rochester. I'm the supervisor of the attendance program, and I also oversee the McKinney-Vento program.
And I'm Melissa Teixeira. I'm a school community intervention specialist in the attendance improvement program.
And thank you guys for being here tonight to support with the presentation. We are, as we understood it, there was a strong interest from the PAC for us to come to speak about chronic absenteeism, especially as it relates to this very unusual school year. and how COVID and isolation, quarantine, and items around attendance are impacting the district's chronic absenteeism rates, and especially kind of looking at how many students are having to stay home due to COVID-related issues. But then also for us to address what the attendance improvement team focuses on a regular basis, and then especially this year in working with our school sites, families, students, and community. With that, I'll ask Laura, I think you're in control of the slides. I'll ask you to go to the next slide. So before we get started and looking at some of our data, just for clarification purposes, a few topics that we'll be talking about throughout the presentation. The first is average daily attendance, or ADA. For just clarification, that is the percentage of students with positive daily attendance. And ADA is used within the formula developed by the state to help calculate annual school district funding based on our ADA towards the end of the year, each and every year, unless there is exceptions added, which has been the case in the past due to distance learning and COVID. Essentially, that number is used to help calculate the funding that comes to San Juan and other districts throughout the state. Chronic absenteeism is defined as a student who is absent for any reason for 10% or more of the total number of instructional days. And that 10% or more, of course, as the year goes on, is always a moving number. So when we developed this report for the PAC, we were able to calculate all of our attendance calculations through the month of October, which essentially was about 52 or 53 school days. So essentially, we're talking about students who would be absent in chronic absenteeism calculations for 6 or more days for any reason. By the end of the school year, when we're talking about 180 school days, that number obviously goes up into how we're calculating chronic absenteeism by definition. Okay. And lastly, chronic truancy, which we're not going to talk about too much tonight, but just for clarification, chronic truancy is a student who is absent for school without a valid excuse for 10% or more of the school days in one school year from the date of enrollment to the current date. That chronically truant student is traditionally those students who were focusing habitual truancy conferences, our school attendance review board meetings, hearings, and ultimately possibly truancy court. Next slide, please. So once again, calculations through the end of October. You can see kind of the historical trend for 16-17 through the 2021 school year, and all of those colors kind of up and near that 95, 96 percentile, actually close to 96 or above 96, kind of in your average year. And then that medium blue color towards the bottom is the 21-22 school year. And so you can see the impact that some of the COVID regulations would be having on San Juan. This is not unique to our district. This is something that is impacting districts throughout the state in terms of the number of students who are required to stay home due to isolation or quarantine. And then obviously due to students who have to stay home because we don't know what their illness may or may not be and need to stay home until that is resolved either through a doctor's note with an alternative diagnosis or a negative COVID test. Our ADA is cumulative and ongoing. So when you're looking at the dates down below, these dates are not weekly snapshots, but as the year goes, more and more days in the school year, more and more days or periods that students can be present for. And so there are times where we have a very strong attendance month, and this the graph line will trend upwards, kind of as you sort of see it at different points here, and that there are other times where we have lower than average ADA, and that is where we start seeing a negative trend line. By and large, though, because of the cumulative ADA that takes place from the start of a school year through the end of a school year, we're always going to see that ADA slightly go down from the start to the finish is pretty much the common trend, just based on the math, and more students missing school as the year goes on. Next slide. So through the end of October, this is our chronic absenteeism rate for San Juan. If you look at 18-19, 19-20, and even 2021, the year that we were primarily in distance learning, through October, we're usually looking at a 9 to 10% chronic absenteeism rate for our students. Once again, with the calculation being about 53 or 55 school days, somewhere in there, depending on the school year and when our start date is. This is students who are at that point missing 6 or more days in the school year for whatever reason. You can see what that looks like this year for us in 21-22. And we'll look at some of the reasons why, but obviously the one primarily impacting us are the mandated COVID absences. Next slide. This is how it looks with those same numbers 2 years back, last year, and then this year thus far in comparison to the state. So you can see kind of back in 19-20 at this time, we had a 9.43 chronic absenteeism rate through October. The state kind of at that time, at state average for all districts combined was at 11.2. So we're usually at a better percentage than the state overall. That continues to be the trend this year, but obviously with that much higher number of students who are considered chronically absent, with 6 or more days absent through October. Next slide. And looking at our chronic absenteeism by grade, the percentages that are at the highest levels are commonly in the elementary division, and most commonly with our kindergartners and first graders. I'll let Victoria and Melissa speak to that here in a little bit, but really at an elementary school level, if you recall or are seeing it with your own children's attendance, there's no period by period attendance. So you are either absent for the day or considered present for the day. And so it's really black and white. With our middle school and up, it is period by period attendance. And so students who are attending for partial days, 2 periods, 4 periods, the calculation is different, and therefore the chronic absenteeism rate usually looks a little better at the middle school and high school level. But really, there's been a strong focus in past years in working with our kindergarten students. Those are the students that do tend to stay home more for various reasons. And it really has become a focal point for our attendance improvement program to work on chronic absenteeism rates in normal years with our kinders. Next slide. In looking at this year's reasons for absence, you will see in the very light blue, this is divided elementary, middle, and high. The very light blue are the total number of absences related to COVID. And when I say related to COVID, I'm really referring to our mandated isolation or quarantine codes. So when a student is either COVID positive or has come into close contact with a student and is required to quarantine. This does not include modified quarantine where students are attending school. This would be students who are out for a quarantine period of time, either by choice or or not. And they are either a close contact or a positive case. That medium blue shade is students who are non-COVID illness, but those are also the students this year specifically that when they are out for a non-COVID illness, they are still mandated to be out until they can clear that it's a non-COVID illness. So some of these non-COVID illnesses may actually turn into COVID-related illnesses. Others stay non-COVID illnesses, but it is taking longer for students to return to school because of those regulations. And there is also the threshold is lower of when a student needs to stay home or be sent home from school based on the possible COVID symptoms that a student is experiencing. Over on sort of the left side of the graphs there, I'll highlight the orange. The orange are uncommunicated absences. So when you look at uncommunicated absences along with the red unexcused absences, really those two are tied together. The red absences, we know the reason for absence is unexcused by law. The orange are the absences that the school sites and attendance improvement office really attempt to dig into to find out why the student is absent. It could be, for example, parent choice to hold a student out because they found out that there was something happening at the school, a COVID positive case. Their student isn't obligated to quarantine, but they're still, let's say, fearful. They hold the student out and they don't communicate that to the school as to why the student is out. In traditional years, if these stay uncommunicated, they do roll to cuts or truancy. But in our year this year, our messaging to families, we're usually allowing 10 days of excused absences for families that don't need to be medically verified. And after that, they do need to be medically verified. This year, because of a lot of the fear related to COVID, there is not that requirement. However, there is a requirement to communicate absences to sites, and we are just seeing a higher number than usual of parents not communicating reasons for absence as the year goes on. And I see questions popping up in chat, and I think we're going to hold off to the end of the presentation to answer those. And I see Victoria answering some in the chat as well. So thank you, Victoria, for doing that. Appreciate it. If you go to the next slide. So throughout the school year thus far, we've had about 17% of our students have COVID tracking codes. Those are the isolation and quarantine codes once again. And these are the percentages of absences for each grade level related to those isolation or COVID tracking codes. Pretty similar across the band, but definitely higher at our elementary and to some degree our middle school level, where close contacts may be more common, or I shouldn't even say more common, just easier to identify. We're at our high school where students are moving from one class to the next, a little bit more movement and not as closely together for as long a period of time, and therefore students are not having to stay home because of a COVID related issue. I will say that 16.7% of students, because more and more students may be identified as a student who is either quarantining or in isolation, that will continue to increase likely as the school year goes, as long as COVID is around and stays with us. At this point, we have a couple slides that really denote what the attendance improvement program is highlighting and working on with our sites and families, students, and community this year. And I'm going to turn it over to Victoria for the next slide. So next slide, Laura. Thanks.
Thank you, Dominic. I'm really proud of the team that I have working for me in the attendance department. This year is like no other. We're facing a crisis globally, district-wide, throughout every district. We're all facing the same thing. But for the attendance department this year, we're addressing chronic absenteeism by focusing on the absences that are not excused and really trying to dig down and determine why students are missing school. We try the tiered level of approaches. The first tier, the school site will be reaching out to the family in a prevention format. Then they would implement a tier 2 with early identification, interventions, reaching out to the school community worker within the attendance department. And then we do follow-up and collaboration with the student school to promote positive school relationships while we're providing resources to bridge those barriers that is interfering with school attendance. A lot of times we're finding these families and their communities in crisis, so we need to plug them into mental health support, food, clothing, transportation. There's a number of factors that are going on that is contributing to our chronic absenteeism for this year. The AIP staff will communicate regularly with the families, which will include phone calls, holding meetings in person, home visits, habitual truancy conferences at the school site, meeting with administrators, trying to bridge that gap between the family and the school site as much as possible, and really focusing on re-engagement for the students that are not coming to school. Next slide. We're working, like I said, closely with the sites to identify those students for intervention, working with the communities to identify the resources inside and outside of our district. And we're also providing data by subgroups for targeted intervention on our West End school sites as well. We regularly provide data to sites so that they can see what their numbers look like with students that are hitting that chronic absenteeism reports on a regular basis. And I think that helps with addressing the needs of each individual site. Since we're such a large district, each school site has different needs. And by running these reports, we're able to address those needs. And we're really focusing again on engagement with the families, opening up communication and conversations, providing families who are in distress and trauma with some school routines, and providing them a sense of school community when everything around them is basically in trauma or upheaval. We're assisting with the independent study program, providing fall learning alternatives to families who, quite frankly, just are fearful of the unknown. And so we're providing them alternative means for their children to become educated. I don't know, is there another slide after that, Laura? Nope.
That's it. The next slide was the Q&A slide.
Yeah,
we're just doing as much as we can to engage the families. The team's doing a good job at over communicating, and we're just trying to mitigate the problems that we see come up on a daily basis.
well, listen, we want to thank you for presenting this evening, and we have included some time for clarifying questions. And as Dominic mentioned, Victoria, I know that you have responded to a few of them in the chat already. But since this is an informational item, we do have some time for some clarifying questions that can be addressed. And then if we do find ourselves moving more into a discussion, then we can certainly pause and add that topic to a future agenda item. So just with that, does anyone have any clarifying questions for the team here? And right off the bat, I do see that Serena has her hand up, and then I see that Amber does. So we'll start with Serena and then move over to Amber here.
There are situations where parents and families might not care as much about their kids' attendance. If a family, like if a parent has something going on in their life, and they might not care about their kid as much. So in situations where the parents and the family don't want to engage with the district or the school site about helping their child's attendance, what is the procedure for that?
That is a great question. And I think it differs based on the grade level of the student and the age of the student. So I'll let, I think Victoria was jumping in there and she can talk a little bit how it might be different for a kindergartner versus 11th or 12th grader.
I think that a lot of times where a family might be hesitant to talk to maybe the school site, my department, school community workers, have a really good knack for communicating with the families, and they do so by text messaging, emailing, and sometimes families will open up in an email or a text much more openly and freely than they would necessarily if they were called. They don't want to call in. So I think we use different means to communicate with families, and we've been really successful in doing so. And I think it all starts with relationship building. And so once a family can trust who they're talking to and realize that we're here to help and put supports in place for them, they're going to be more inclined to come to school once their barriers are met. Because until those barriers are met, attendance is just a symptom of a bigger problem. So I think we're very transparent and we're always open to help. So we have, Melissa, who's on with us tonight, she focuses on our kinder, and the rest of the school community workers spread the schools out with 16 schools per school community worker, and I have 4 of them in a big district. So they do a really good job at communicating with families on different levels and in different ways.
Thank you for your question, Serena. And then I see Amber's hand, and then we'll follow up with Karen.
Thank you. Good to see you, Victoria.
Nice to see you.
I am a fan of your team, as you know. I love your lens, and I look forward to getting the data on the why that you talked about behind why families are kind of having challenges with unexcused absences. I think my question is sort of along the lines of, with the impact to knowing that there's kind of a challenge with staffing, do we have a sense of how many of those positions are attendance clerks? Because I think that when I hear that the school site is kind of handling that, I wonder how many schools are short on attendance clerks, if that's sort of where you know what I mean? If that's kind of like where it begins, I would love to see kind of that data. I also just wanted to appreciate Serena's question. That was great. And then I think I have a question sort of typed out in the chat. I don't think it's necessarily for you, Victoria, but I'm going to go ahead and drop it in the chat. I think it's more so a district-wide question. When I think about the whys, I'm just going to kind of give this context before I drop it in there. When I think about the why, I wonder if there's some level of parents who were impacted by COVID related, like job loss or, some sort of financial insecurity where they could actually use like gift cards or grants or some sort of financial support, and I don't know if that's something the district could do. So that's kind of just the context behind the question that I have there. I don't think that that's something you could necessarily answer, Victoria. I'm not sure, but I realized that was layered and that was a lot, so I'm going to stop talking. And thank you.
I always appreciate your questions, Amber, and I always appreciate our collaboration. Just to touch on the staff shortages that are at the school sites, we are facing staff shortages, but we don't necessarily just stop with our interventions with just the attendance clerk. We're reaching out to school counselors, administrators, social workers. So when we're engaging and we're digging deep to find who at the school site, if they do happen to have shortages, we're finding who we can connect the family with, and to include the teacher, because the teacher would be the front line. They're the ones that are going to see every day if that student is present or not initially, and then we go from there. So we are addressing some challenges. However, we're still reaching out to as many people as we can per school site when we're dealing with these kiddos. I didn't hear the last, well, you were layered, so I'm not sure if I can answer the second part of that as far as any codes for job losses and so forth. That would be, you know, we have to go by ed code for excusing of absences.
Thank you. And then I believe, oh, someone dropped off. I see Tom has his hand up, but I believe that there was someone else who had their hand up if they wanted to jump in first. Otherwise, we'll go to Tom.
Yeah, I think it was Karen and then Tom, and then Stephanie has a question in the chat.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Karen, did you want to jump in?
Well, it was really me and you answered my question, Victoria. So thank you for that. Amber kind of had a question that I had, similar question. Just kind of wanting to know, I know we're focusing these amazing resources on those that are having difficulty with attendance. Are we able to offer that in a way for maybe someone who's not particularly truant yet, and are there levels to it? Like as soon as there's one, are we acting on that? Or I think he said 7 or 6. 10% of the day, 10% of the year. So are there levels to that? I think I might have missed that. I think you said tiers.
We usually, when you know, you look at 3 absences, unexcused absences, then it jumps to 6, then to 9. You know, initially sites are going to identify those kiddos that fall within the 3 and 6 mark, and they're going to begin their tiered interventions. And that could be as simple as maybe their teacher talking to the parent and finding out what's going on. And, you know, maybe the kiddo was sick and the parent forgot to call in. So the parent does have 5 days to clear absences. So once we get involved at the district level, you're looking at kiddos that may have in excess of, you know, 6, 9, 15 on up. And we try to jump on them as soon as possible. But again, we're a big district with a heavy caseload. So we try to get them as quickly as possible. And I think with the reports that we run on a regular basis, we're going to identify those kiddos pretty quickly so that we can address those needs right away. So it is tiered, and it's based on the amount of absences that they accrue.
Great. And I see, so Tom, and I believe I also see that Stephanie had a question as well. So Tom, we'll start with you and then we'll end with Stephanie.
Okay, yeah, I was wondering if there seemed to be one or more common themes or issues that seem to be most prevalent for why parents or families were saying they didn't feel that it was safe for their kids to go to school.
Well, I mean, like I mentioned at the beginning, I think families and the community as a whole, they're in crisis. It could be students facing, you know, their family being evicted. It could be fearing for their safety because they don't want to walk on the streets that don't have sidewalks. They're facing transportation barriers. They could have chronic illnesses that the site and the district don't know about. So I mean, I think it's across the board varied, but I do know that the pandemic has definitely played a role in the choices that parents are making with whether they want to send their kids to school or not. Most definitely.
Yeah, so it doesn't sound like there was any like one thing that stood out as making them feel unsafe. Okay.
No, I mean, I think it's just it's a big puzzle with a lot of many moving parts and a lot of reasons that are individual to each family, because one parent's concern might not be another's, but you know, definitely the fear over the unknown is a driving force, but along with all the other barriers that families face on a regular basis, compounded with the pandemic.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, and Stephanie, would you like to have the last question here?
You want me to
You're on mute, Stephanie? Stephanie, are you muted?
You know, it looks like she dropped off. Oh, no, there she is. Stephanie, you're muted.
Okay, while Stephanie's working on that, I do have two questions. I noticed that Steve had asked a question that I was wanting to ask as well. And it was, is the AIP considering at all temporary online learning to be put in place for students who are out due to COVID so that they don't miss those days?
I can jump in and answer that. It wouldn't be the AIP program doing that, but the when a student is out now for quarantine, the site can place the student on short-term independent study for a minimum of 3 days. So if they have to be out for isolation or quarantine, that short-term independent study contract can happen for those type of absences, which would allow the student then to do their work and be marked present for those days rather than have an absence.
That's awesome. And how is that being communicated down to the school sites, to the parents?
So I know there have been regular meetings that have taken place at the district level to present to principals. And this being a relatively recent update with an agreement with our teachers and other labor partners. I believe it is just now starting to roll out. I don't know if there's if Melissa's still on or if John could answer that better.
I am still on. So our site leaders, so this happens at the site level where when a family needs to have children out on quarantine, that we do coordinate the short-term independent study. So it's the communication is between the teacher and the student.
Correct. But how is that being communicated down to the parents, the program itself?
It's not necessarily a program, but it's just a continuity of learning. It's a contract between the teacher and the student and the parent. And so that's why it's being, it's not a program that's communicated to parents on a global level. It's something that's communicated as it occurs due to quarantine.
Okay. Because I asked that question because this has happened a few times within our family. And I didn't have that information. So I'm wondering how would that have been relayed or communicated to me? And probably, and I'm sure I'm not the only parent who that hasn't been communicated to.
It just became formalized within the past 2 weeks. So it is possible that it wasn't communicated in a formal way to you because we had not had it formalized yet.
That's new. Okay.
You do raise a really good point, and so we can double down on that and ensure that we have healthy communication happening around that opportunity. But it just came out in the past 2 weeks.
Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you, Melissa.
You're
and then my
welcome.
other question was, how many school sites have COVID testing on site to minimize the days absent for students?
All of them.
Oh, that's wonderful. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. Well, Dominic and team, I just want to thank you all for joining us this evening and providing this report. We greatly appreciate it. And then obviously to all of you as well for asking these clarifying questions and helping us have a greater understanding, a better understanding of chronic absenteeism. I just wanted to note that there has been a change to a presentation date for the board. So the full MTSS team will be presenting at the January 11th board meeting. So if you're interested in learning more about that, we definitely encourage you to attend that meeting as well. So thank you again for joining us. And with that, we'll turn it over to Laura for general visitor comments. Oh, Laura, I think you're on mute if you're talking.
All right. At this point, I don't see any visitors that have joined us, but I'll just pause momentarily just in case we have any visitors that would like to make a comment or ask a question. Okay, with that, we will proceed to a review of the LCAP report.
Okay. So thank you, Laura. So our next agenda item is going to focus on providing you with an overview of the local control and accountability plan, specifically the various sections of the full LCAP document, as well as the LCAP summary that we will be interacting with this evening as a group. First, though, we'll turn it over to Laura again to see if there are any visitor comments for this particular agenda item.
Okay, again, I'll pause for just a moment. I don't see any visitors. Okay, so we will go ahead and proceed.
Thank you, Laura. All right, everybody. So in your orange binders that some of you may have picked up already, you will notice that the 2021-24 LCAP document is included in the LCAP report tab. And for those of you who do not have this in front of you, we've included a PDF in the chat for your reference. So we'll just give a second to put that in and let folks access that document before moving forward. Okay. Thanks again, Laura. Okay. So in looking at the table of contents on page 2, you will see that the LCAP is made up of 4 sections. There's the 2021-22 local control funding formula budget overview for parents, followed up by the 2019-2020 LCAP annual update, then the 2020-21 learning continuity and attendance plan annual update, and then finally the 2021-24 local control accountability plan, which is what we will be focusing on this evening. You will notice that the entire document is 185 pages. We recognize that the length of the document is one of the barriers and challenges of making the LCAP more accessible to the public. As a result, we will be providing and interacting with a shorter summary document this evening, and then encourage you at your leisure to explore the more detailed document on your own. So now we will have you transition to the 2021-22 LCAP overview document, which can be found in your orange binder again under the infographic tab. And Laura is also going to include a PDF in the chat for your reference as well. So we'll just give a moment for folks to locate that and for Laura to put that in the chat as well. All right, so on page 1 of this document, which is on the screen here, this includes the following information. We have some information regarding our state priorities, a description of the local control funding formula and local control accountability plan. There's a breakdown here on the bottom left of our district's enrollment by ethnicity, as well as the number of students, schools, and staff that we have in our community. And then finally, we have a breakdown of the LCAP funding sources and totals here on the right. We'll go to the next slide here, I believe, Laura. Thank you. So pages 2 through 6 include a description of our LCAP goals, their related actions, and the amount of money allocated to that specific action. And then finally, what student groups the action funds are being principally directed to. Laura, I appreciate the cursor following, so thank you for that. Then go to the next slide. On page 7, this includes an overview of our stakeholder engagement process. Again, this is just a summary. A more detailed description is included in the full LCAP that you can review as well. And then finally, we've attached the metrics associated with each goal that we are using to assess progress towards achieving our goal. So I'd like to just take a moment and orient ourselves to this document. Again, we recognize there's a lot of information, so we're just going to take a breath here and go through each of the columns so that we know what information is in what column here. So in the metrics column on the far left, this includes a description of what is being measured, along with the data source that we are using. Then the baseline column includes our baseline. Notice that the data that is disaggregated by student subgroup also includes a disparity percentage. And this is the maximum difference between any subgroup compared to the overall rate. Then the year 1, 2, 3 outcome columns will be updated yearly over the next 3 years. And that's why those are intentionally blank at the moment. And then finally, the desired outcome column on the far right there reflects the results that we want to see in 3 years. So with that, we are now going to have you go into breakout rooms for approximately 20 minutes. Each room will focus on the actions, expenditures, and metrics for one of the 4 goals. And then each group will report out so that we can learn more about each goal. Each room will also have a facilitator to assist the discussion. And then in reviewing the goals, the actions, expenditures, and metrics, we would just like you to consider and focus on the following 3 questions. What do you notice and see in the data? What resonates with you and why? And then what are some of the key noticings and wonderings from your group? And then after the 20 minutes, we're going to ask that one person from each group share your group's key noticings and wonderings from question 3. So the share out with the entire group will focus on question number 3. Okay, so with that here, we have already met our facilitators this evening. We have Kim, Steve, Tom, and then we also have Gellica Harrison. So Gellica, I apologize, I didn't introduce you early on when we first entered the group here with the entire group, but Gellica is our Assistant Director of Assessment and is also joining us this evening and will be joining us in future meetings as well. So again, just want to thank you for joining us and helping us this evening with this section.
Thank you, John, for having me. It's nice to be here.
And so with that, Laura, if we want to go out into the breakout rooms and our facilitators will take care of everyone, and then we'll see each other in approximately 20 minutes. Well, welcome back, everybody. Before we get into the share out, I just wanted to offer a clarifying point, just in case some folks were wondering. So you probably noticed that a lot of the data you were looking at was from 2018-19 and 2019-20. And so the purpose of this evening, remember, this is data that helped inform the LCAP that we developed as a community last year. So tonight's purpose was to have you just do more of like, let's get acquainted with the current LCAP plan as it is, make some observations, have those wonderings. And that's why we're not asking this evening for recommendations or input. We weren't analyzing the data because it's already past data. So just to let you know what's coming up is in future meetings, now that we've kind of have an understanding of our current LCAP, we'll be bringing in more current data where, of course, we will ask you to make observations. We will also ask you to consider some of the causes that are resulting in the current data that we see, and then make recommendations and considerations based off of what you're seeing. So I just wanted to highlight, if some of you were wondering why we weren't eliciting feedback, it's because of when the data was, it's past data. So with that then, if we just want to go, we'll just go group by group. And we'd love just, within a couple minutes of just to share what are some of the key noticings and the key wonderings from the group. So why don't we start, actually, why don't we start in reverse order? So we'll start with goal 4 with Kim's group and then work our way down. So Kim, would you like to start?
Oh, sure, we can start. We did not decide on who was going to share out. So I think if Karen, if you feel comfortable with sharing out, I'll share my screen so everyone can see. And if you want to share out.
Yes, I can.
Okay, perfect. And I will share my screen.
Okay.
All right, do you see it, Karen?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
perfect. Does everyone see it?
Yes.
Okay.
Awesome.
All right, so we'll start from the beginning here. There you go.
The beginning. So thank you very much for letting us know about the reason why we saw that data from 2019 to 2020. That was a big factor in our conversation. So we appreciate that. For goal 4, it was really good for me because I was able to notice the graduation rates, and it started like having these questions of the outdated data and why we don't have it. So thank you for that. But it did cause for me to think, what are our projections going to be for the next year? And you answered our question already on when we can see that data soon. And then another thing that we did notice is, why are we comfortable with such large differences in between the groups and the overall rates, and what we're doing, I believe, to get that corrected. And then 4.10, the budget versus smaller budgets for other areas, we might need more funding and more focus in those.
Mhm.
Okay.
Thank you, Karen.
And what resonated with us, lack of communication probably was the biggest, because we didn't know of all these different components and resources for the pathways. It was I was happy to see where the funding is going and how much money, but to see it on paper, it was just really difficult to figure out in real time, like where that is. Being that I have a student in high school, 10th grade, being a part of the district since she was in Montessori at Cottage, to now I have a student in 1st grade at Greer Elementary School. So it's just really interesting to me to see where it actually is. And then just key noticings and wonderings from that we had a 4.9. We wanted to know how that was implemented. So like K through 8, it's only $20,000. So we were kind of wondering what that was, if that's like documents or paperwork, or like how are we educating those K through 8 students on career planning?
Great job, Karen.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and so let's see here. Why don't we move over? We'll go down to goal number 3. So Gallica and team, if you would like to share out.
So we also didn't decide who was going to share out, and I can't share my screen still. But I think the 3 of us could probably share out together. Amber and Zena, if you're okay, I'll start the conversation. You can chime in a little bit about what we talked about. Amber, are you good with that? Zena, are you okay with that? We can all 3 share?
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Okay. Okay. All right. So initially, we were really looking at the CAS scores and the subgroups within the CAS scores. And we noticed that there were some subgroups that weren't included. Amber, Zena, if you want to chime in.
Yeah, I think that Zina and I had a really enriching conversation about how the Afghani population isn't really represented there. And we know that when it comes to ELA, that's particularly a population that could use some additional support. We also talked about just kind of looking at what wasn't represented there, where that population could potentially kind of plug in is sometimes we see with Asian, that's not listed there. And Zina could probably speak to this more about some families mark white, but that's not really, you know, the American white in terms of assimilating. So I kind of want to pause there if you want to expand on that.
Yes, because the data shows that 53% of the white are, I mean, in the data there are 53% for white, and I was saying that these are not the real white, I mean the American white. They are Caucasian from Iraq, from the Arab countries, even from Afghanistan, so they check the white. So that this data is for the white especially is not precise 100%. So maybe we can add more like, I don't know, Middle Eastern or Arab, or I don't know, maybe you can figure out something to add them to these data. Thank you.
Yeah, I echo that. I mean, this is California. We should be leading the way in terms of diversity options with ethnicity. I also think that we sort of had an enriching discussion, and I appreciated Gallica for kind of pointing out what grade levels are tested for CAS scores. We kind of got hung up just on ELA. It's escaping me, Gallica. Do you remember what our other point was? I totally got sidetracked.
I do. In the minute I say it, you're going to be like, yeah, that's right. We talked about foster youth and homeless and the supports that were available for them. And you noticed some of the scores were low. and again, we were in kind of ELA in the cast, but you noticed the scores were low, and if you want to expand on what your suggestions.
Yeah, thank you for that. I noticed that the scores are low there, and I know that for that particular population of students, there's a lot of transition that happens in their life. And so having somebody who is just genuinely all about them and can be a stable adult in their life, I think would really make all the difference in terms of those academic, the attendance, like everything could just change from that. I might romanticize like that idea of like having that sort of connection, but I do believe that connection is a huge influence and it sort of impact. When I think about my son, his connection to school is the after school program. And he hates it if I pick him up right when it's time for his day to end because he's trying to be part of the after school program. And that's his connection to school. And I get that. And so I always make sure that he gets to stay a little bit part of the after school program. So anyway, I just think that having some sort of like stable and genuine adult, like a mentorship program is kind of like what I think about. I also had named, I can't help but notice how low African American our youth are coming in there. And what's glaring to me is typically when we're talking about English, it's not, sure, go for it. It's not our second language. And so for that to be so low with ELA scores, I can't help but wonder why, because it seems like that could be something a little bit higher. Yeah, I think that that's kind of all that I have there.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Amber and Zena.
Great job, team 3 or goal 3.
That's right, goal 3. All right, so we'll goal 2. Well, Steve, your group that you worked with.
Yeah, great stuff, everybody.
Yeah.
Excellent. So Serena has volunteered to be our spokesperson, so I'll let her take the floor.
Yeah, so when we were looking through the statistics, we had numbers that focused on discipline and suspension and expulsion and mental health services and ways to improve safety and physical and social well-being on campus. So one thing that we did notice is specifically in the suspension and expulsion areas of our demographics, we saw that there are higher stats in the exact same demographics. And I want to pause for a moment and agree with the group that just spoke. I think it was group 4 that talked about that there were some demographics that were missing. So in the numbers that we saw categories for white students, African-American students, Hispanic students, English learners, special ed, foster youth, and low income, but there were no other demographics. So there weren't any groups for Asians, American Indians, Filipinos, Pacific Islander, those groups. So I think we also had the same wondering of where are the numbers for those students. So we did notice that there are higher statistics in regards to suspension and expulsion for English learners, special education, foster youth, and African American students. And we also had made note that there's a clear socioeconomic disruption with those demographics versus the lower rates of white students in those same categories. So we wanted to point out that it's very important to point out that those are linked. And another thing that we talked about was safety on campus. Some things that have to do, like one of the parents in our group has students that attend Mesa Verde, and there's been problems there with other students dealing drugs and how to address safety aspects there on campus like that, because part of goal 2 is in making sure that school environments are safe. So the question is, how are we addressing those more deep issues that are rooted in schools? Because you might have rushed one student that's dealing drugs, but being a high school student, like I know that there are lots of other kids out there who have access to those resources. And it's hard to just say that, oh, if we just catch these 2 or 3 kids, it's a problem that's taken care of. So I think when addressing those problems of school safety, the access to substance abuse is also a big part of a student's safety, especially when it comes to the education. So I think one of our questions and observations was, is there going to be funding that's directed towards ensuring that safety in that aspect is addressed? And then one other thing that we did talk about was the idea of creating a safe and equitable environment inside the classroom. And we talked about teacher trainings that take place to teach teachers how to be more equitable and opening in their classrooms. But one thing that we did discuss was just because those teachers are required to attend those trainings, required to get those hours, do they actually engage? Do they actually bring it into their classrooms? So I think what we wanted to see was, what do those trainings include and what steps have been taken to ensure that teachers are applying what they learn to their teachings. So that's a little overview of our conversation.
Thank you so
Great
much.
job, Serena.
Yeah.
Great job, team 2.
All right, and so finally we'll move to goal 1. So Tom, your group, please.
Right, okay, let's see if I can share my screen. Okay. Okay, let's see, we actually got a lot of, how it was impacting. So it was Neelam and Stephanie and Elnora in our group. It's, I want to make sure, am I off mute here? Okay, so, family engagement was really one of the important things. And then looking at the issue of absences. So at the school site level, they were really seeing how the impact of absences was affecting them. And so apparently, Stephanie was saying that the ability of testing at sites is really important. Also, how attendance is affecting the ability of students to participate in sports, and that communication is lacking with teachers on assignments to students. So when they're not, when they're in quarantine, not able to attend, not all the information can get to the students, in particular things like science labs, or when they're involved in physical education, that it's impacting them. So the real need that I was hearing from everybody inside of our group was that procedures to improve the students getting back into the classroom faster. So whatever procedures can be done, so if they're quarantined, they can return much quicker. I think that, let's see, I believe that pretty much covered it. And there was, well, there was concern looking at the data of how, in particular, it seemed like foster care was being severely impacted. So that's what came from our group.
All right, thank you, Tom. And listen, I want to thank, yes, I want to thank all of you on this initial discussion tonight. I think this is setting ourselves up for success as we move forward, as I said, as we start to look at more recent data and then to start to better understand what our current data is telling us. I also just want to mention, this evening, everyone, we just got a little slice, right? And some of you just got a little slice of the 4 goals. So I would strongly recommend that if you do have some time, to take a look at some of the other goals as well that you were not a part of this evening. So like the first example that comes to mind is for example, I heard if you were in goal 3, you might find some of the wonderings that you had identified in goal number 2 or goal number 1, or vice versa. So if it is of interest to you, I strongly recommend that you take a look at some of the actions in the other goal areas, as they might address some of the questions you had this evening as you were looking at your one specific goal area. So with that, I just want to thank you again for this, and trying to find where our next step is here. I was taking copious notes here and throwing papers around.
We're moving on to committee business.
Committee business. All right, Laura, thanks for keeping me on track. So thank you all. And so Kim, I think you're doing committee business here.
I sure am. All right. So let me see where my agenda is here. Just a second. Laura, can you? Okay, perfect. Okay, so in discussing attendance, attendance, I sent out a link to a few of you who had not responded to let us know if you would be attending or not. And so my plan is to send out a text and an email to see if you will be in attendance in all of our following meetings. And the reason I'm doing this is because attendance has been a problem for our members. And we do have one who just resigned, one of our members, and we have several members who are in jeopardy of no longer being a part of our committee. And if we do not have a quorum during our meetings, then there's a lot that we can't get done. So it's vital that we attend our meetings regularly. And I'm so grateful and thankful for majority of all of you attend regularly. And I appreciate that. We all appreciate that because it helps us to function the way we were meant to function. So I will be sending something out just kind of as a reminder, and along with a lot of our materials that are going to be upcoming for each of our meetings, just to kind of keep us all, to keep us organized and to make things more accessible, more easily accessible. So attendance is right now is very important to our team. So if there's someone that you know personally or that you've met through the LCAP and you haven't seen them in a while, I'd say reach out to them and encourage them to, you know, show up for the meetings and let them know how important their voice is. And so that's about it for attendance, just a reminder. Now our Let's Connect form and what did you think of our meeting survey results? I wanted to share those with you guys. Was very excited to be getting some of these surveys back, and so I'm going to share it right now.
Oh, I think Laura has to stop sharing and then I think you can share.
Okay.
Yeah, Kim, I wasn't sure if you actually want to share a document.
Yes, I do.
Okay, you bet.
Okay, let's see. Who can share? So Laura, I think it's this button. I think I'm keep pushing the wrong button.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, here we go. There we go. I think I did this last time.
You got it, Kim. You're doing great.
All righty. So the first one I want to share with everyone, move this out the way, is our Let's Connect. I'm not going to share who shared, but we did get 11 responses. And this is the breakdown here of who shared, whether they, how they were invited to our LCAP PAC through a friend or family, teacher, staff, board member, flyer. So pretty much every way people were invited to LCAP. So pretty different ways. What is your preferred method of communication? No one said phone call. So I am going to back off on the phone calls.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. So everyone, it was kind of a 50-50, email and text. And so that's why I've opted to do texts and emails moving forward. And what is your preferred way of meeting? People want to get back connected, I see. So a small percentage of online Zoom, but of course that's still going to be a way that we are going to meet. But I would also like to be able to meet in person sometimes. And so I'll be sending something out to see who may be interested in doing an in-person meeting.
Yeah, I miss dinner time. Y'all know what I'm talking about.
Right, I do too. I do too, Stephanie.
I miss dinner time together.
So of the many reasons to join the LCAP PAC, what is your number one reason for joining? And these were amazing. So I'll just go through some of them. Change, to improve the qualities of students in school. It's a mental therapy for me to know I am supporting and creating a strategy for the students, staff, and families for 2021-2022. I think that the mission the LCAP PAC has and the group of students the LCAP PAC chooses to focus on is amazing. And supporting kids in poverty, and hoping to lend a voice to kids who could use additional services. All amazing reasons to join the LCAP PAC. And thanks again. This next question is, this was surprising for me. Maybe not for everyone else in our group, but do you participate in any other committees or groups in the San Juan Unified School District? And majority of everyone who responded does. And then they listed here all of the different committees and organizations that they participate in. And this is really helpful moving forward for us, because then we can know how to better utilize our PAC members with the information that they may know that we can share with one another. And do you work with any nonprofit organizations? About a 50-50. And these are the few that people work with. I know that for me, I actually was at Mutual Assistance Network, and that's how I found out about the LCAP PAC. There was a representative, she's no longer with us, but who came and did a presentation there and invited me. And these are the school sites that students are associated with, which is good information for us, because then we can know what schools our parents or staff members or family members or community members engaged in, and what's happening at those school sites. And I want to thank you 72.7% for saying yes, you'd like to meet with me and Steve, and also you 27.3, maybe later. And we will be setting up some meetings after the holidays to meet with all of you.
And bring dinner.
Yes. And then I'm just going to go through a few things here. And these were just fun questions, but it just kind of shows, you know, how much we all have in common. And so the first one was, what is your favorite mealtime? 66% said dinner. And what is your favorite season? 44% of us said summertime. I believe I was one of those. And what causes are you passionate about? This, I really saw this and was like, we're collectively, we are so much alike. If you read through the list of these, we definitely have a passion for equity and equality and education and justice. So, and I thought these were just fun. And what I noticed with all of these on our bucket list is that a lot of folks want to travel to different places. And I really like this one, being a supportive grandparent. So that was one of our lists, one of the forms. And for everyone who hasn't filled this out, I just encourage you, please fill it out. We really want to get to know who you are. This helps us get to know you a little bit, but meeting you, whether it's on Zoom, face-to-face, phone call, helps us to get to know you a whole lot better. I had the opportunity just recently to go and meet with Neelam, and it was an amazing experience. She has a beautiful family. And as I left, her and her sister called me their sister. And I just felt like, wow, see, this is what it's all about, connecting, real connections and building true relationships. And so that's what I like for us all to do with one another, to have a stronger team. And
yeah, I really thank, because my dad, who always appreciate me to do good things, so he's came talk to my dad, who is at Nepal in my country. He feels so grateful about that. Thank you, Kim.
You're
very
welcome,
much.
Neelam. I really enjoyed your family. And then this one right here was just a survey, and this survey I'll send out after every single meeting. I was going to put it in the chat, but I don't think most of us click on the chat and go to it and do it at the time during our meeting. So I'll just send it out. And if you'd like to fill it out, you can fill it out. It's just so that we can do better during our meetings. and even know what we have done right. So, and continue to do that. So out of the 7 responses, 1, I believe, was a visitor, and the rest were members. And this is just a breakdown. Was our meeting a good use of time? Most said yes. Was it positive? And then for the break even, we probably want to see how can we improve and what worked well during this meeting. And these were some of the positive comments. And what could be done to improve future meetings. And these are also positive comments, how we can improve. And that's it. I'm going to move on. And the next thing on our agenda, Laura, you can pull it back up. Thanks, Tom. Is our outreach plan. So as I mentioned earlier, we do have an open spot on our LCAP team. And I know that the board has to make those decisions. But I would like for our team to begin to start reaching out to people who you believe would be a great fit for our LCAP PAC, who wants to come and really do the work. And I'd like for you to invite them to our meetings. And my challenge to all of our members is invite one person to our next meeting. And that can be the start of our outreach. Invite one person to our next meeting that you believe will benefit from what they will hear from our meeting, and also make and give voice where we can benefit from them. And then I would also like, inside of our binders, there is a flyer. And you can use that flyer. Let's see. Well, it's in our binder. And it's a flyer that was created. It's like a 1-pager flyer. And you can use that flyer to share with friends, family members, other parents in the district, but really begin to start getting the word out about our LCAP, and invite as many people as you can to come and share, give voice. If there are any community members or organizations that you believe that where we can benefit from them coming and presenting, please share with them as well, and forward their contact information to me and what they do and how they could benefit our LCAP PAC with presenting.
I did to Weave on Twitter, and they said they're interested.
Well, if you send me their information or send them mine, that'd be perfect, Stephanie. So those are ways in which we can begin to outreach. Does anyone have questions?
Kim, I just have a comment to what you said, which was really great. You'll find that flyer in section 3. It's the single page description flyer that we've kind of covered. We did put extra flyers in that protective sheet for you to pass out. I think everyone has like 4.
Yep. It's perfect, Laura.
I'll tweet it. Oh, we have a digital copy. Oh, right. Okay.
Oh, awesome, Jacqueline. Okay, that's perfect. Okay, and I'll start resending some of the surveys out.
We still need a block party.
Awesome. So does anyone have any other questions or comments? This is your time to share, and I welcome your voice.
I want to say really quickly, thank you so much. I'm not sure who, and I think it might have been Laura, who put all this wonderful binder together. Let me just say, yes. I was very, very shocked, and thank you, Tom. I think I did thank him via email, but thank you for bringing this to me. I was at Greer. He dropped it off for me, and I really appreciate that because it slipped my mind to go pick it up. And just being able to see everything in such detail right here for me, it just helped me feel prepared. It helped me feel a part of the team, and it really gives me, and like I said, I'm not completely, I mean, there's so much in the report, but it really gives me an idea of what we're here for, what we're doing, and to see the data is really good. So thank you.
That's awesome feedback, Karen.
Oh, Laura, I just said, can we get a graph, a census graph for the whole district, like the students, how many students we have? And you remember how we had in a previous year? Kind of like how Kim just did it with the circle graph.
I think there is, Stephanie, I'm not sure, check in the LCAP plan
But you went
summary.
low, I can't hear you.
Can everyone else hear me? Yeah, check in your plan summary, Stephanie, because there is a graph that breaks it down. I'm not sure if that's what you're looking for, but
let me
check
look
that out and let me know.
Is it in the sheets, the slide sheet?
Let me grab it for you. It's in section 10.
You didn't divide no sections? I don't see sections. It's the only tabs.
You have a table of contents.
Okay, wait.
And if you go to section 10, the LCAP report,
Okay,
the tab itself, it should be under the plan summary. It'll be, let me find let's see.
Oh, projected revenue. Okay, revenue.
It's on page 109 of 185. So that, I think maybe that's what you're looking for, but let me know. It's got the breakdown of the, can everyone see it? Page 109?
Is that what you're looking for, Stephanie?
I'm looking, hold on. I'm almost there.
And there's also narrative above that graph that gives you the breakdown.
1, 7. Yep, that's that small little one. Yep.
Okay.
I was looking for a big one. That's why. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Perfect.
Yeah, there's also information on the California Schools dashboard that gives the breakdown according to the student groups, the total number of students in the various student groups, like 21,600 are in the social economically disadvantaged group, which is 54.8% of the district. So I just put a link in the chat that will take you to the California Schools dashboard. And you can find, I think, some of that information you're looking for there.
Yeah, because that graph, it really helps out when I'm talking to other parents and networking. They look at, they're more interested. It's like I feed them in with that one. So I just need to update it one. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Okay, so we're going to move on to our future agenda items, and I'm going to pass it over to Steve.
All right, at this time, we're going to be taking notes of and suggestions on future agenda items. So if anyone would like to give some suggestions, keeping in mind what our focuses are, and we will make sure we do our best to get those items on the agenda. So if you want to raise your hand or go ahead and speak, just depending on how many folks want to offer.
Hey, Steve, pardon for my interruption. Would you, we included some slides on what the future agenda, like board agenda items are, if folks want.
Yes, let's start with that. My bad. I jumped.
No, it's all good. Come on, Steve. No, yeah, folks. So listen, as Steve mentioned, of course, we just wanted to share the tentative board agenda items with you through the month of January, so you can see what topics are going to be addressed by the board. I know it's kind of small print, so I'll just highlight here. Some of the upcoming agenda items include an ELO grant update, a special education plan update, a family and community engagement update, as well as a social, emotional, and wellness presentation. And then on the next slide here, again, which you've seen and it's in your binders as well, is just our PAC meeting schedule, which are the topics that we plan to address at our future PAC meetings right now, which include, as we've been doing over the last couple of months, reviewing the plan, data connected to our LCAP metrics. And then, as Steve just mentioned, keeping a focus on our LCAP purpose as well, which we reviewed at the beginning of this meeting. So Steve, thanks again for letting me jump in there. I just thought, I guess we thought that would be helpful to have that.
Yeah, no, you're right. I just got excited. And
it's all good. It's an exciting meeting.
It's my turn. I gotta go.
All right.
All right. So basically exactly what I said before. Oh, Tom has a question. Go ahead, Tom.
Okay, yeah, I want to mention President Villasquez, when she spoke tonight, she mentioned that there would be on the future agenda, although it wasn't listed there on the one that they showed, that in the future they'll also be talking about the trustee areas, because as some of you may know, with the 2020 census data out, then various voting jurisdictions have to adjust their voting boundaries according to populations, and that includes the San Juan School District. So that will also be a future agenda item for the school board. But I guess another item that I think might be worth considering as a future agenda item is that in our bylaws, we have a student LCAP leadership chair. So last year was the first year we had that person. So only the students on the committee vote for who they want to be as the student leadership chair, and that person works with the chair and assistant chair in helping to put together the agenda. So I would suggest that at a future meeting we have the students elect who they want as their LCAP leadership chairperson.
Thank you, Tom.
And I would just like to follow up on Tom's remarks about the future agenda item with the trustee areas. And so that is going to be on the December 14th agenda. That was just recently added, and so it didn't make it to the print on that slide right there.
Thank you, Melissa, for that update. Okay.
Anything else that, okay, Serena, go ahead.
I think it would be interesting to hear more about those trainings that staff go through to be more equitable and inclusive in classrooms, because I think that does directly connect to our English learner and our foster youth and our homeless youth. So I think that would be interesting to hear how those trainings are facilitated and what is taught during them.
Brilliant. I like it. Go ahead, Amber.
I just wanted to follow up on that. I think that I tend to be someone who grasps onto qualitative data. And I think when I heard Serena say how that's where I see kind of an area of growth for the school district is we get a lot of quantitative data, and it's kind of like checking off boxes. And I really want us to have a more qualitative lens on the data that we take a look at.
Agreed. And let's see. Oh, I got Karen. Go ahead, Karen.
Like to see, I know we've talked about mental health, we've talked about wellness. I know that if I could see that one slide that the district is going to go over again, and I think they might have went over it the last district meeting in Tuesday of what they were doing in regards to mental health, and just to maybe see some kind of data or some kind of other information. And I know our last meeting we had that representative explain that great program, and that was good, but just a little bit more, what else are we doing? What other, is that the only program that we have in regards to mental health, mindfulness for students and teachers?
Karen, there's going to be a social emotional wellness update that's on the board agenda for January 11th.
Okay.
So what might be good is if folks are interested in that topic to view that, because it's accessible via YouTube in addition to in person. And if there's additional questions related specifically to our work with the LCAP, maybe bring that back to the next meeting, then we can see what else we need to dig into. Okay.
Yeah, please. I appreciate that. To do that.
And also, Karen, if you can't make the meeting, they do post recordings on their website.
Yes. No, thanks for that question. That was a good question.
Okay. I'll give one more minute for anyone that wants to just speak up.
Can you read mine?
Yeah, go ahead, Stephanie.
No, read it for me. My mic is like this.
Okay.
Let's see, did she say something in the chat? Okay, we got some chat. Let's see. Maximize this. So student opinions in each category, like Nora did tonight, about foster care and quarantine. She experienced it. Okay, good. And funding doesn't match with percentage. Would that be money allocated? Could you explain what you're comparing on the numbers so we can understand? Go ahead.
Yeah, so basically, I think allocated for foster care is like 1 million, 1.4, right? So even with mental health as a counselor, like just maybe about mental health. We have all that money allocated out, so we haven't seen no improvement. Even if we say if we didn't have more resources like we were hiring out more mental health, and families are struggling, I see more people struggling and things happening in schools. Each school year is like we're in here, 30 months, fight, miscommunication, counselors. I had to reach out multiple times because they've been calling back and checking in on me. And I'm like, wait a minute, we put all this into mental health, but nothing is being fully, nothing's changed. It seems like it got worse. So that's bothering.
You want to see kind of more detail of how the money's being spent and where it's a little bit more detail, do you think would?
Yes, because it's like I'm hiring a whole bunch of parents right here, and we're going out to all these schools and reaching out to kids and just checking in with them and other parents. That's just really fair. That's what I do. And a couple other parents to do that. They're just fair if I got a bunch of parents all together, and that's something that we do because you guys are just explaining to do that. And you'll see an improvement of an engagement of families more connected and reaching out and being more involved. You'll see that, but I see things get worse. So that doesn't match up with all that money being allocated. The result is like poor.
Okay, some of that I got, some of it I didn't, because of just the Zoom audio or something. So if you want to email Kim or me, we'll definitely take that and we'll add it to the list. Okay, anyone else? Tom, do you have another question?
Yeah, you see the California Healthy Kids Survey. I know that's information that we've looked at in the past, and I'm not sure, could somebody tell me whether that is something that we'll be getting current information on, or I'm not sure when the California Healthy Kids Survey is given and when the report results are reported.
Tom, I don't have any information on that this evening, but we can definitely put that down and we'll look into it as a future agenda item to bring up.
Okay, because that covers, I think, a lot of the social, emotional, and the student connectedness to school. So I think that would be of a lot of interest. Thank you.
No, thank you for bringing that up.
Remember when we were supposed to go to like the Capitol, and it was an event. It's like right before of last year, so we couldn't go because it was shut down. Is there a way that
Stephanie, can you put your question or your comment in chat, because you're very muffled?
Yeah.
Or do you have access? Are you on your computer?
Okay. And I think
we have one more item on the agenda if there are no more questions. And that would be for general visitor comments.
Yes, and at this point, we do not have any visitors, but we have all 12 PAC members here still. So, yay, everybody, good job. So with that, Kim, you can go ahead and adjourn the meeting. However, I would like to make a public apology to everybody. I goofed and I forgot to start the recording until we were at Melissa's presentation. So if you go back and review the recording when it hits online, it's going to start with Melissa. However, we will recapture Melissa's and Paula's comments and the attendance in the meeting minutes.
Okay.
So I apologize. Although we could stay on a little bit longer, we can go back and do the welcome and the
Oh, no,
attendance.
Laura.
Just kidding. So take it away, Kim.
Sure. So at our next meeting, and that's so amazing, we're all here, but at our next meeting, I was hoping just kind of in building community and building engagement with one another, that we could take a snapshot. So at our next meeting, knowing that our camera will have to be on, even if it's just for a moment, because I never turn mine on, but just for a moment, so we can get a group picture together. So I'm not going to do a motion for this. I'm just asking if everyone could do it for our next meeting. Okay, sound good, great. All right, so our meeting is adjourned. It is 8:21, and I thank you all so much for participating this evening.